Kicked out as a teen for false rumors spread by my brother, years later parents see my success and demand money to help my brother after they abandoned me. I never imagined that my life would turn out like this, that the people who were supposed to love me unconditionally would throw me away like I was nothing. But they did. And the worst part? It was all because of my own brother. Back then, I was just a kid trying to survive in a house where I was nothing more than an afterthought. No matter how hard I worked, how much I tried to prove myself, it was never enough. Because in my parents' eyes, there was only one son who mattered, Nathan, my older brother. Nathan was the favorite child, the perfect one, the one who could do no wrong. He was smart, charming, athletic, and my parents adored him. Meanwhile, I wasn't a troublemaker, but I wasn't special either. No matter what I did, I could never match up to him. But I never expected that my own brother would be the one to completely destroy my life. It happened when I was 17. Nathan was already in college, and I was still in high school working part-time jobs to save up for my own future. I didn't have much, but I had a plan. I wanted to get into a good university, move out, and finally start a life where I wasn't in Nathan's shadow. But Nathan had other plans. It started small, missing money from my parents' wallets, my father's expensive watch going missing, and even weird rumors being spread about me at school. I didn't think much of it until one night, everything exploded. I remember coming home from my shift at the grocery store, exhausted, only to find my parents waiting for me in the living room, their faces twisted with rage. "Sit down," my father snapped. Confused, I did as I was told. My mom threw a wad of cash onto the table in front of me. "Explain this," she hissed. I stared at the money, completely lost. I don't understand." "Don't play dumb, Jason," my dad bellowed. "Nathan told us everything. You've been stealing money from his room. You've been gambling behind our backs." "Gambling? Stealing?" My stomach dropped. "I never took anything," I said, my voice shaking. "I don't gamble. I don't even know where that money came from." Nathan was sitting on the couch, arms crossed, his expression unreadable. "You really gonna lie, little bro?" he said, shaking his head in fake disappointment. "I tried to cover for you, but when I found my stash missing, I had to tell them. You have a problem, man." I was stunned. Nathan was lying, and my parents were eating it up like it was the truth. I turned to them desperately. "Mom, Dad, I swear. Enough!" My father slammed his hand on the table. "You have done nothing but bring shame to this family. We raised you better than this. But if you're gonna act like a criminal, then you can live like one." I felt the blood drain from my face. What do you mean?" I whispered. My mom's voice was ice cold. "We're not going to support a liar and a thief. You need to pack your things and leave." Just like that. No trial, no chance to prove my innocence. My own parents were kicking me out over a lie. Nathan just smirked as I looked at him, begging silently for him to tell the truth. But he didn't. He just stood there, watching as my world collapsed around me. That night, I packed a small bag of clothes, took what little money I had saved, and walked out of the only home I had ever known. I was 17, alone, and completely abandoned. I spent the next few months couch surfing between friends' houses, working multiple jobs just to survive. Every dollar I earned went toward food and rent. I barely slept, barely had time to think about what had happened. But in the moments of quiet, when I was alone, the pain was unbearable. I kept wondering why. Why had Nathan done this? Why had my parents believed him so easily? Did they ever even love me? I could have given up. I could have let that betrayal destroy me. But I refused. I used the anger, the pain, the betrayal as fuel. I worked harder than I ever had before. I applied for every scholarship I could find. I studied relentlessly, and eventually, I earned a full-ride scholarship to a top university. I worked myself to the bone, taking internships, learning everything I could about finance and investments. By the time I graduated, I had enough money saved up to start my own business. Years passed. I became successful. I built a life that my parents never thought I was capable of. I had everything I had once dreamed of. And through it all, I never heard from them. Not a single call. Not a single apology. Until now, after 7 years of silence, my phone lit up with a message from an unknown number. It was from my mother. "Jason, we need to talk. It's about Nathan." I should have ignored it, but deep down I knew this was the moment I had been waiting for. They finally regretted everything. I stared at my phone, reading the message over and over. "Jason, we need to talk. It's about Nathan." 7 years. 7 years of silence. 7 years of struggling, building my life from the ground up, proving to myself that I never needed them. And now, out of nowhere, my mother was reaching out. I knew it wasn't out of love. Curiosity burned inside me, but I wasn't stupid. I wasn't about to walk blindly into whatever mess they had created. So, instead of replying, I ignored the message. 2 days later, another message came in. "Jason, please, your father and I just want to talk. We know we made mistakes. Please call us." Mistakes? That was a funny way to describe abandoning your teenage son over a lie. I wanted to leave them in the past, let them feel the same isolation I felt all those years ago. But I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever this was about, it wasn't just a simple apology. So, against my better judgment, I picked up the phone and called. The phone barely rang twice before my mother picked up. "Jason!" she gasped, sounding almost relieved. I said nothing, waiting. "Sweetheart, it's been so long. How are you?" We miss you." I scoffed. "You miss me? That's new." There was an awkward silence before my father's gruff voice came through the speaker. "Jason, we don't have time for this. We need your help." I knew it. I leaned back in my chair. "Right? And what exactly do you need my help with?" Mom's voice wavered. It's your brother. Nathan is in trouble." I almost laughed. "Of course he is." She hesitated before continuing, her voice thick with desperation. "Nathan made some bad decisions and, well, he has a lot of debt. Serious debt. We tried to help him, but it got out of control, and we lost the house, Jason." That made me pause. They lost the house? The same house they kicked me out of without a second thought? For a moment, I imagined my parents standing outside, bags in hand, the same way they had thrown me out at 17. The irony was almost poetic. "We've been trying to get back on our feet, but the creditors won't leave us alone," my father added. "Nathan, he's not handling it well. He's sick, Jason. He needs help." I felt nothing. No sympathy, no anger. Just emptiness. "What do you expect me to do about it?" I asked coldly. My mother sniffled. "You're successful now, aren't you? We saw your company online. You have money. We're not asking for much. Just enough to help Nathan pay off his debts and get back on his feet." I closed my eyes. Unbelievable. The audacity. They threw me away like trash. And now, when their golden child screwed up his own life, I was suddenly worth something? "I see," I said, keeping my voice even. "So, let me get this straight. You want me to hand over my hard-earned money to the same brother who ruined my life? The same one who lied about me, got me kicked out, and never once tried to make things right? Jason," my mother pleaded, "he's your brother." "No." The word came out sharper than I expected, but I meant it. "Jason, please." My father tried again, his voice firm. "You wouldn't even be where you are if it wasn't for us raising you." I let out a dry chuckle. "You're right. If it weren't for you kicking me out, I wouldn't have had to work my ass off just to survive. So thank you, really. But you don't get to take credit for my success." There was silence. Then my mother's voice, hollow and bitter. "I can't believe this. After everything, you're just going to turn your back on us." I finally let out the laugh that had been bubbling up inside me. "You turned your backs on me first. And now, when it's Nathan who's suffering, suddenly family matters again." I could almost hear her grinding her teeth. "I hope you can live with yourself, Jason," my father spat, "because we'll never forget this." I smiled. "Neither will I." And then I hung up. For the first time in years, I felt free. Hanging up that call should have been the end of it. I thought they'd get the message, accept that I wasn't their safety net, and move on. but I underestimated their desperation. For the next few weeks, I was bombarded with messages, calls from unknown numbers, guilt-tripping voicemails, even emails begging me to reconsider. My mother's tone swung between pleading and angry accusations. My father's messages were cold, listing all the sacrifices they had made for me, trying to convince me that I owed them. And then there was Nathan. Unlike my parents, he wasn't begging. He was furious. One of his messages read, "You think you're better than us now? Just because you got lucky? You wouldn't even have a life if it weren't for Mom and Dad. If you had any decency, you'd help. But I guess you were always selfish." I almost laughed. I was selfish? This was coming from the guy who lied about me, got me thrown out, and never once tried to make things right. And now, when his reckless decisions had caught up with him, he was lashing out because I refused to clean up his mess? I ignored them all, but they weren't done yet. One evening, I was coming home from work when I noticed a familiar car parked outside my building. At first, I thought I was imagining things, but as I walked up, the driver's side door opened, and there they were, my mother, my father, and Nathan. I sighed, my exhaustion turning into irritation. "Are you serious? We just want to talk," my mother said quickly, stepping forward as if that would make me care. I folded my arms. I already said everything I needed to say. My father's expression was stone cold. But my mother? She looked desperate. And Nathan? He looked angry. "You really won't help your own family?" Nathan snapped, crossing his arms like a spoiled child. I exhaled sharply. "What family?" My mother flinched. "Jason, please. We know we made mistakes, but we're still your parents. And Nathan is still your brother." "No, he's not." I stared directly at Nathan, letting every ounce of resentment I had for him boil over. "You stopped being my brother the moment you ruined my life." His face darkened. "I was a kid. I made a mistake. You act like I killed someone. You might as well have." I shot back. "You didn't just get me in trouble, Nathan. You got me kicked out. You stole my future. You made sure I had no one to turn to." Nathan's lips parted like he wanted to argue, but for once, he had nothing to say. My father, who had been quiet up until now, stepped forward. His eyes were cold. "I hope you know what you're doing, Jason," he said in a low voice. "Because when you turn your back on family, you end up alone." I let out a humorless laugh. "I've been alone for years, Dad, and I turned out just fine." There was a long silence. Then my mother sighed heavily, shaking her head. "You're going to regret this." "No," I said. "I won't." And with that, I turned my back on them one last time. I didn't watch them leave. I didn't need to, because in that moment, I knew this was truly the end. A few weeks later, I heard through an old friend that my parents had been forced to move into a tiny apartment on the other side of town. Nathan? He was still in serious debt and was barely scraping by. Meanwhile, I continued to grow my business, surround myself with people who actually cared about me, and build the life I had always dreamed of. Did I feel guilty? No, because for the first time in my life, I was truly, completely free. Be sure to comment and tell me about your opinion about Jason. If you guys like this confession and want to listen more confession story like this, then click on the like button and subscribe to me. Your sub motivate me to create more video like this. See you in a next video with new story.